Hello everyone, I'm Jacob Kauf and I'm the nerd on the street, and today I'm going to show you how to set up live streaming and recording with Jibri on your Jitsi server. Alright guys, so a couple of weeks ago I made a video about how to set up your own Jitsi Meet server for video chatting with people in a web browser, and a lot of you guys liked that video. I'm glad it was helpful. Now the Jitsi Meet application has the ability to display buttons to record or live stream your video chat, but those buttons would not be visible if you just followed my tutorial that I made on how to set up your Jitsi server. That's because the streaming and recording is actually handled by a separate module that's called Jibri. It stands for Jitsi Broadcasting Infrastructure, and Jibri is what's going to handle the recording and streaming on your Jitsi server if you want to set those features up. Now, before we get started today, this is going to be a doozy of a video, and it took me quite a while to figure out how to get Jibri actually working. And honestly, for most people, I wouldn't even recommend setting up Jibri. Even if you want to record your Jitsi chats or if you want to live stream them, you can download OBS very easily or any other program, and you can very easily record on your computer your screen while you're in a Jitsi chat, and you can stream that way as well. Now, even though Jibri is going to be a little bit more integrated, it's just a single button you have to click, it's not a separate program from Jitsi, it is a little less flexible than something like OBS. For instance, right now Jibri is only able to live stream to YouTube, no other services. The RTMP URL for YouTube is actually hard-coded into the source code of Jibri right now, which I find a little questionable. There's an open issue about it on Jibri's GitHub page. The developers, it seems like they've been putting off adding that feature in. They claim it's to prevent DDoS attacks on RTMP servers, but I find that kind of hard to believe considering, OBS and every other program out there for streaming allows you to put in an RTMP URL. And when you're setting up an RTMP server, am I going to get DDoSed on this is not one of my primary concerns, any more than it would be with any other type of server. So that's a limitation. Another thing you need to know about Jibri before you go into this, if you're trying to set this up, is that it is very resource intensive. Now, in my tutorial on how to set up a Jitsi Meet server, I showed you how to do that on a $5 a month DigitalOcean droplet, and a Linode or a Vultr server would work just as well as a DigitalOcean droplet. But Jitsi Meet in itself is not super intensive if you're just chatting with a few people. You can get away with 1 GB of RAM, a single CPU core, and a very small disk. Now, if you try to do this Jibri video on a $5 a month droplet, it is not going to work. You're going to spike your CPU up to 100%, and then you're going to run out of RAM immediately, and your server is going to crash if you try and do this on a $5 a month droplet. I've actually done some testing, and the minimum that I would recommend if you're going to be setting up a Jibri server is the $40 a month DigitalOcean or Linode server. That includes 4 virtual CPU cores. It includes 8 GB of RAM, and that's actually a little bit overkill on the RAM. But in order to understand why Jibri is resource intensive and what resources it actually needs, you need to understand what it's doing. When you start recording or streaming with Jibri, it actually spins up an XDisplay server on your server. It opens up an instance of Google Chrome in that XDisplay, and then it uses FFmpeg to screen capture the Google Chrome instance that joins your video chat. So it's really not doing anything special. It's not intercepting the video any more efficiently than, like I said, you can do by joining the chat with a computer that's got OBS installed. But once you've got it set up, you do have a single button that you can use to just start recording a chat, and it will automatically save it to your server. The FFmpeg video encoding is why you need at least 4 CPU cores. In my testing, if you try to do this with 2 CPU cores, FFmpeg is going to fall behind real time. It's not going to be able to process the video as fast as it's actually happening, and so that's going to start buffering in your RAM until eventually you run out of RAM and your server crashes. So if you're trying to set Jibri up and you're trying to balance out your resources, my advice would be keep a close eye on your RAM usage, but the RAM usage is really just a symptom. The cause of the RAM going up is if your CPU is not adequate enough to handle the real-time FFmpeg encoding. So with all of that said, I did figure out how to get this working. As usual, I'm going to put all of the commands that I'm using in the configuration syntax in a page page at nerdonthestreet.com, and I will link that page in the description of this video. As a quick reminder, if these videos are helpful to you guys, if you're not already a Nerd Club member, consider becoming a Nerd Club member over at nerdclub.knots.co. Nerd Club members are what allow me to do cool stuff like this. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump in, and I'll show you how to set up Jibri on your Jitsi server. Alright guys, so here we are on the desktop, and right here you can see I do have my Jitsi server running. This is the exact same setup that I showed you how to do in my other video on how to set up the Jitsi server, but it is running, like I said, on a $40 a month DigitalOcean droplet. That is a substantial cost difference, and there are ways to get around that if you know how to use the DigitalOcean API to resize things. But those are the resources you're going to need for this to be successful. I did want to show you down here in the bottom right menu in Jitsi. This is where the recording and streaming button are going to show up when we're done. As you can see, there is no recording button and there is no streaming button here right now. When we're finished, that's where they will be. So here on our Jitsi server that already has Jitsi Meet running successfully, we're first going to install our dependency packages. These are things that we're going to need in order for Jibri to work that we do not have right now on a DigitalOcean droplet. Now I'm going to explain each one of these. Linux image AMD64, this is the Linux kernel. This is just the generic kernel. Now the reason I have to install this is because DigitalOcean actually gives you the Linux image cloud package by default. If you're on a Linode server or your own server, you don't need to install this package because it's probably already installed. And this is still Debian 10, by the way, just like was shown in my previous Jitsi video. But on DigitalOcean in particular, we cannot have the cloud kernel because the cloud kernel does not include the sound modules that we'll need when we're spinning up that X server later and attempting to record audio from the Jitsi call. So we're going to need the actual generic Linux image, so we'll install that. FFmpeg, like I said, will be used eventually to capture the actual video and encode it and either save it or stream it to an RTMP server. Curl, unzip, and software properties common are just things that we're going to use in installing other software. So we'll go ahead and grab all of these packages. And you can see already we are adding quite a bit to this server. There are a lot more moving pieces when we're adding Jibri. Now once that's done, if I run uname space -r for release, we'll see the version of the kernel that I'm currently running. As you can see, like I said, we're running the Linux 4.19.0 cloud kernel. The cloud kernel does not contain the ALSA loopback module. That's the particular module that we need in order to record sound later, because servers normally don't have speakers plugged into them. So there's no need normally to have ALSA modules built into your cloud kernel. But as you can see, we're still running the cloud kernel, and that is currently going to be the kernel that we're going to boot into by default. Now, if I do an apt list -- installed and then I grep for Linux image, you're going to need to do this yourself because I don't actually know what version of the kernel you're going to be running. So if you try and copy and paste a command from my website for this part, it will probably fail. You're going to need to run this command and figure out which version of the Linux cloud kernel you've got if you're running a Linux cloud kernel. As you can see, we've got Linux image 4.19.0-8-cloud. This is the name of the package. So we need to uninstall that package. We're going to run apt remove. We'll paste in that package name here, and normally this would be a bad idea, removing the version of the kernel that we're currently running, and there is going to be a warning about that in a moment, but it's okay for us to do this because we do already have another kernel version installed, and I know that that kernel version is going to work. We also do want to uninstall the meta package here, Linux Image Cloud AMD64. If you just uninstall the meta package, then you'll still have the specific version that you've got until you go and remove that one too. So we'll go ahead and run that command. We will let it proceed. Now, as you can see, we're getting a warning. You're running a kernel and attempting to remove the same version. We're not going to abort this because, once again, I already knew that was going to happen, and I know that we've got a working kernel version installed. So now that that's done, we can go ahead. You can see grub regenerated its configuration with our kernel that is left, so that's perfectly fine, and we can do a systemctl reboot to get into the new kernel. I'm going to go ahead and SSH right back into our server, and as soon as we're in, if I run another uname space -r for release, you can see the release of the kernel that we're running no longer has cloud in the name. So we have accomplished switching over to the normal kernel. The next thing we need to do is enable the ALSA loopback module, because once again, that will be used for sound capturing later. If I do an ls mod to list my loaded kernel modules, and then I grep for snd_aloop, which is the name of the ALSA loopback module, if I do that, nothing's going to return because that module is not loaded right now. What I need to do is I need to load it by running modprobe snd_aloop. And after I load it, we can run lsmod again, and the exact same lsmod command now shows us that we have loaded the smd aloop module, as well as a couple of modules that it depends on. Now, we don't want to have to manually run modprobe every time our system starts up in order to start that module. So in order to make it start automatically, we're going to echo snd underscore aloop into our etc modules file. And that way, next time our system boots, it will get automatically loaded since it's listed in that file. Now, the next thing we need to do is install Google Chrome. And it's funny because a lot of the reason that a lot of people are using Jitsi Meet right now is because they want to get away from Zoom and Google Meet, Google Hangouts. Those are free video chatting solutions in your web browser that you could be using. And so you might be trying to get away from Google and going to Jitsi, but Jibri is made to work with Google Chrome, not Chromium, but the actual Google Chrome. It might be possible to get it to work on Chromium, but it's already difficult enough when you're using the actual Chrome, and that's what their documentation calls for, so that's what I'm going to show you today. So in order to install Google Chrome, we first need to import Google's package signing key, which we can do very easily here with a curl command piped into an apt key add command, and we can see the apt key add got an OK. Next, we're going to add the Google Chrome repository to our system by adding it to a file inside of our sources.list.d. So we'll run that, then we can do an apt update. You can see when we do this apt update, now we've got Google Chrome's repositories being updated, and then we can just do an apt install on Google Chrome stable. And so that's going to pull in more stuff, X11 utils, X11 server utils. Google Chrome is a desktop application. And that's another reason you don't want to skimp on RAM, is because this whole thing is going to run through Google Chrome when it's done. So even though 8 gigabytes is probably overkill, like I said earlier, if you've only got 1 gigabyte of RAM, imagine trying to run a window manager with Google Chrome running and joining a video chat with a single gig of RAM, and then encoding that with FFmpeg at the same time. That would never work. All right, but Google Chrome has finished installing here. Now we need to install something called Chrome Driver. Chrome Driver is basically a tool that can be used to control Google Chrome without physically interacting with it with a mouse. It's a way to script out the Google Chrome interface. Now, Chrome Driver actually is not available in a standard package that you can install, and I hate going out of repo. I hate going around my package manager when I'm installing applications. There is a Chromium driver that is in the Debian repositories, but like I said, Jibri's documentation calls for Google Chrome, and so that's what we're going to install. So in order to install this, it's interesting the sequence that the documentation calls for. The first thing we're going to do is set an environment variable in bash. So we're going to set chrome underscore driver underscore version equals to, and then this is going to be looking up just the latest release of Chrome Driver. So this command will not get outdated. The reason why they used this complicated bash variable thing instead of just telling you what version to put in the URL is so that you can continue to just copy and paste these commands as they update the Chrome Driver. So we're going to run that, and now that that environment variable is stored, actually if we do an echo on Chrome Driver version, then we can see the current Chrome Driver version is 81.0.4044.69. If you would run this echo command before this other command, it would have returned nothing because that variable had not been set yet. So now that that's done, we are going to do a wget on chromedriver.storage.googleapis.com/81.0.4044.69/Chrome Driver Linux 64, and we're going to save that to our home directory. And after that's been saved, we are going to unzip it into the current directory. We're going to remove our zip file because we no longer need it now that we've unzipped it. And so now we've got a Chrome Driver directory, and we're just going to move that Chrome Driver directory into user local bin. Now, once again, I normally don't like doing this, putting application files into my system directories manually, because this is not going to get updated by our package manager ever. And if I wanted to remove this later, I would have to remember where I went and put these files. I can't just do a simple apt remove on Chrome Driver. But this is a single utility server, so I'm okay with it in this instance. So we can run that command to move Chrome Driver to our user local bin Chrome Driver, and then we are going to make sure that it's owned by our root user. Now, if we do an ls-al on user local bin Chrome Driver, we can see it is already owned by root. The permissions are slightly more lax than what the documentation recommends. The group has write permissions here. Now, I don't think this actually matters, but just for the sake of getting things as close to their documentation as possible, because once again, if you get one little step wrong with Jibri, the whole thing just won't work. We'll go ahead and do what they're suggesting, and we'll set our chmod to 0755, which means that group, just like other, does not have write access, only the owner has write access. Even though our owning user and owning group are both root, which once again, I don't think that last part actually mattered. But now we can actually install Jibri. And so here's where we can do apt install Jibri. And as you can see, this is going to pull in some more dependencies, including our actual xserver, xorg. We've got input packages coming in. We've got video dummy package coming in because we don't actually have a display connected to this server. We've even got x screensaver coming in, just in case our headless server needs a screensaver. And we've got also utils that is going to connect with the also loopback module to handle the sound in a bit. And somewhere in here, you can see we're using ice window manager. It's a very low resource usage, very lightweight window manager. And I would never use that on a desktop. I may have tried it out once or twice very long ago just to see what it was, but we are going to use it here because that's what Jibri is programmed for. So we'll go ahead and install all of these. And you can see there is a keyboard configuration prompt here. I'm going to select English US. And the reason why that was prompting me was because we're installing the X server. X is going to want to know if we were hypothetically to start an X server and plug a keyboard into it and want to type in an actual graphical window, it would want to know what our keyboard layout is. So that is done. Now Jibri is going to run as its own user on the system, and we need to make sure that Jibri is added to some of the groups that it will need to be in. Right now, if I do a cat on Etsy password and I grep for Jibri, we can see that Jibri is a user that exists on our system. If I cat out our Etsy group file and grep for Jibri, you can see that Jibri is by default part of the audio and video groups as well as the Jitsi group. This is the command that the Jibri documentation recommends running. So audio and video we're already a part of, but we also need to be part of the ADM group. That's for logging. And then we also need to be part of the plug dev group. So we'll go ahead and run that command. And now if we do that cat on Etsy group again, you can see we have been added to the additional groups here. So we've got Jibri installed and we're maybe about halfway done with the process. If we go ahead and open up our Prosody configuration file, we need to reconfigure Prosody a little bit. So we're going to nano into prosody/prosody.cfg.lua. Now Prosody has multiple configuration files, and we touched one of the configuration files under conf.avail in the previous video, but we didn't actually touch this Prosody overall configuration file. We are going to touch it here. I'm going to do a Control W and look for the conference section, and right down here, set up a MUC, multi-user chat server on conference.example.com. So Jitsi and Jibri and the different Jitsi components use these multi-user chats in order to communicate control information between themselves. And right now, we're not going to be able to create one because this is commented out of our configuration. So we're going to uncomment it. We're going to set the domain name here. And as a refresher, my Jitsi server is located at jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com. So this component is going to be conference.jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com. This domain name does not actually have to resolve, but this rest of the domain name does need to be the actual Jitsi server. So that needs to be uncommented. We do need to uncomment this modules enabled as well. And this right here, this section about enabling these items, this is not part of the Jibri documentation right now. So that's a little bit of value added for you guys, that you don't have to go and figure out why it's not working until you find out that you have to uncomment that. So now we need to go down to the bottom of the file and we need to add another multi-user chat component. Now I'm going to copy and paste this configuration, and you can do that as well from the page on my website. The component name needs to be internal.auth.yourjitsi server. Now the Jibri documentation under storage, the documentation has it set to null. What I found is that it will not start up. It will throw errors that there's no storage available unless you change the storage to internal. So make sure that that's set properly. And then we also need to add a new virtual host entry here. This virtual host entry is going to hold the user account for the Jibri user. So we're going to put the Jibri user into a different virtual host than the rest of our users went into so that it doesn't show up as a participant when it joins the call. There are very few advantages to using Jibri. One of the few advantages is that you don't have to have an actual person in your call showing up and being the camera. The camera is sort of invisible. And so this virtual host is going to be recorder.your Jitsi server. Authentication will still be internal plane. And so we'll save that configuration. And now we're going to register the 2 new accounts that Jibri is going to use. One of these accounts is going to be used for the control side of things, for Jibri communicating with the other components of Jitsi. The other account is going to be the account that it uses when it joins the call to record. So for the first one, we'll do prosody ctl register Jibri, we'll use as the username. And then this is going to be registered on auth.jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com, and we'll make the password Jibri password. You can make these whatever you want, but make sure to keep track of them. And then the second one that we're going to make, where we'll do a prosody ctl register, this is going to be our recorder, and that is going to be registered on recorder.jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com. And then this one we'll do recorder password, and we'll run that. And you'll know that your prosody configuration is, for the most part, good if these 2 commands succeed, because if you try and run a register command on a domain that doesn't exist, like recorder1.jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com, you'll get an error message that the given host name does not exist in your configuration. So we know our configuration at least contains the 2 domains that it needs to. So we'll clear the screen again. Now we need to configure Jacofo. Once again, this is the Jitsi Conference Focus service, and we're configuring its SIP communicator in this video. And we're going to come in here and we're going to add 2 new lines. The first line is going to be our Jibri brewery, and brewery is what they call the room that these different components will join in to figure out what services are available. So that's for control purposes again. And like I said, internal.auth.jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com, that's the component that we set up in the prosody configuration for control. And then pending timeout here, this is going to be the amount of time that Jacofo waits. So when you click the start recording button, Jacofo is the service that is giving you that start recording button and that is going to turn around and say, okay, recording has been requested. Jibri, get in there and record. And then Jacofo, before it displays a failure message, it is going to wait 90 seconds because it might take a good minute or so for an entire X server to start up, especially the first time after a reboot when everything's not loaded into RAM. It might take a few seconds for the X server to start up, for Google Chrome to open up, and then for the system to actually join your call. And so Jacofo, the control mechanism, is not going to consider Jibri as having failed until 90 seconds have passed. And if you request a recording to start and it does not start after 90 seconds, then Jacofo will turn around and tell Jitsi Meet to display an error message. Now, just a quick sidebar, one important thing about Jibri is that a single Jibri server can only perform one task at a time. It can only record one room at a time. You can't have one Jibri server in more than one room at a time because it's like a Google Chrome tab on your computer. You can't have a single tab of Google Chrome navigated to 2 different Jitsi calls at the same time. And because Jibri is really just simulating joining a call, one Jibri server cannot be in multiple Jitsi rooms at the same time. However, if you want to set up multiple Jibri servers, you can do that, and you have to point them all to the same brewery so that Jacofo knows when it goes to look in there, it's going to basically look inside of this room to see what recorders are available and how many recorders are available. Or rather, when you start recording, it's basically going to look in here and say, hey, is anybody available? And then the number will go down by 1 every time one of the Jibri servers goes off and starts working. So we'll go ahead and save that sipcommunicator.properties file. Now we need to configure Jitsi Meet. So this is going to be under etc Jitsi Meet and your domain name -config.js. So this is a JavaScript file. And since it's a JavaScript file, this is actually being read when you access the website. You don't have to restart any service for this to take effect. We're going to do a Control W for file recording, and we're going to uncomment this. File recordings enabled, we will turn to true to enable the file recording interface. We're also going to look for live streaming enabled, and we are going to uncomment that and set it to true. And then there's one more item, And it is present, it's listed lower down in the file, but it's just part of a list of undocumented features. It doesn't have any comments explaining what it is. So we'll put it up here next to live streaming enabled to make our file easier for us to read later. This setting is hidden domain, and that is going to be set to recorder.jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com. And this is going to tell Jitsi Meet that when somebody from the recorder.jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com domain joins, such as our Jibri server, it should be hidden. It should not show up as an active user in the chat. Because once again, Jitsi Meet is the front end to all of this. So that's where we configure that. We will go ahead and save our Jitsi Meet configuration. So now we need to make a directory where recordings are going to be stored. We're going to just make dir, I'm going to put it at /recordings. And then I'm going to chown so that the Jibri user and Jibri group own the /recordings directory. Finally, we are going to configure Jibri. We're like 40 minutes into my recording here and we haven't configured Jibri yet. So we're going to nano into etc jitsi jibri /config.json. And we've got quite a bit to do in here. We're going to come down to our recording directory first and foremost, and we're going to set this to /recordings. Now this finalized recording script path, we are going to empty this out. If you want, you can have a script run automatically when a recording finishes. Now the recording is going to save by default in 720p, and it's got a fairly low bit rate, and by that I mean efficient. It doesn't look bad, it doesn't look any worse than the call itself, but it's not going to take up a ton of space on the disk from what I've seen in my testing so far. But let's say that you wanted to transcode from the .mp4 file that it saves by default into another format, or you want to scale that with FFmpeg, or you want to maybe copy it to an external location, you can make a .sh script and you can put that pretty much anywhere, make sure Jibri has permission to execute it, and then you can put the path to the script in here, and then when a recording stops, that script will run automatically on the completed recording file. So that's a nice feature there. We're going to come down to xmpp_server_hosts, and we're going to, don't be confused by all of the default examples here. XMPP server hosts, this is just jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com because that's the name of the server where XMPP Prosody server is located. Similarly, the XMPP domain for our Jitsi server is jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com. So the examples were not the same for those two items, but what we're actually putting in is the same. Domain is going to be auth.jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com, so auth.yourdomain. And then here are the Jibri credentials. So these are the credentials for the control, like I said. So this is going to be Jibri, and I made the password Jibri password. All right, we'll keep going down here. The control muck that we're going to join is internal.auth.jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com. The room name is Jibri Brewery. That was what we set in our Prosody configuration, and that needs to match. The nickname can be whatever you want. I'm going to just call it Jibri, and we'll never actually see that because it's only going to join this Jibri Brewery room in this internal auth domain, which we as an end user will never be inside of. We're going to come down to the call login section, and this is going to specify how we actually join calls. So for that, we're going to have recorder.jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com. That is the domain that we're joining for. Remember, because we told Jitsi Meet that if we join on this domain, it should not display us as a user in the call. So that's what Jibri is going to join under. And then the username is recorder. And then the password is recorder password. So that's all that we need to do in this file. I do want to point out, if we come down to the bottom of the file here, there is a usage timeout option that you can set if you'd like, and this is going to set the maximum amount of time that a Jibri service can run. So let's say that you want to prevent somebody from recording more than 2 hours at a time. You could set this usage timeout to 120 minutes. This might be useful if you just want to make sure that somebody doesn't accidentally leave a recording running for all time and run your server out of storage space or something like that. But I'm not going to set that right now. We're just going to save this file, and all of our configuration is done now. However, we're not finished with what we're doing because, get this guys, Jibri only works with Java version 8. If we do a Java-version here, we've got Java 11 by default on Debian 10, and that's fine for most things, and it's fine for Jitsi and Prosody. You know, some of the components that we've already installed for our Jitsi server in the first place, we're using Java, and they work perfectly fine on Java 11. In fact, they don't work on Java 8. However, Jibri in particular needs Java 8 and not anything newer right now. So we need to install Java 8, and we're going to install it. We're going to keep Java 11 installed, and 11 will still be the default. But we're going to have Jibri start up with Java 8. In order to do that, Java 8 is not in the Debian repositories right now, so we're going to add a third-party repository just for Java 8. In this video, we're going to use the JFrog repository. JFrog is a company that makes Artifactory and some other tools that are used in large enterprise development settings. So this is a pretty well-established company, at least. And they've got an adopt OpenJDK repository that hosts different versions of OpenJDK. So we're going to add that repository to our system. First, we were just importing their key file, but then we're going to run add apt repository. And after that's done, we are going to run an apt update. And we can see we now have the JFrog repositories being pulled in and the package lists from those. Now we can do an apt install adopt OpenJDK-8-hotspot. And that's going to install Java 8 on our system. Now, if I do an update alternatives --config Java, that's going to display our Java default configuration basically. And you can see that our default Java version is still the automatically determined version, and it is still Java 11, and we're going to keep it that way. I'm actually going to just hit enter to keep the current choice. So if I run java-version, we've still got Java 11 on our system. However, now we can run /user lib jvm adopt OpenJDK 8 hotspot AMD64 /bin /java-version, and that returns Java 8. So that's the version that we need to run Jibri with. How are we going to manage that? Well, as you might recall, the Jitsi services, including Jibri, can be managed by systemd. Now we can cat out our etc systemd system jibri.service, which we're going to start in a moment, and we can see that the exact start line points to a different script. Now, if you were doing this from scratch, you would have to check all of these lines, exec start, stop, and reload. However, since I've already been through this, I know that the only one of these three scripts that contains a Java command is the launch.sh script. So we'll open up opt jitsi jibri launch.sh. And right here where we had Java before, we're going to get rid of Java and we're going to paste in the path to Java 8. So that's exec user lib jvm adopt OpenJDK 8 hotspot AMD64 bin Java, and then the rest of our options. So we're just going to save that file, and now when systemd starts this service, it's going to run that start script and it's going to use Java 8 since it's specified in the script. And finally, if I have not made any typos throughout this video, then we should be all set. So let's see. We're going to do a systemctl restart on Prosody, and we're going to do a restart on Jacofo. Load in all that configuration we did. We're going to restart the Jitsi Video Bridge 2, and we are going to enable --now to also start the Jibri service. And we're enabling it so that when we reboot the system, it comes up automatically as well. So that all finished. We didn't get any errors. If we wanted to be sure, we could check all the systemctl statuses, but I just kind of want to see if it works. So here's what I'll do. I'm going to open up an SFTP session to the server. I'm going to come out to our root directory. Here's our recordings directory. So this is where the recording is going to be saved. So we're going to stick that right here in the side. And then I am going to bring my Brave web browser here, and we are going to navigate and we're going to start attempting to record, and we'll see if it works. So we'll go to jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com. I'm going to type in test123 here, and we will create a new room. It's going to ask us to authenticate. Yep, I am the host, so I'll type in my username and password that I had set in the previous setup video. So now we are in a Jitsi room. Now, you don't actually know if things are really working with Jitsi until you have a second user join, because if your Jitsi video bridge isn't working, Jitsi Meet is happy to display your own webcam to you until another user tries to join, then it'll kick you out if the Jitsi video bridge fails to start. So just to make sure we're all good, I am going to grab my phone and I'm going to also join on here. So test 1, 2, 3, and I won't bother doing the phone screen recording today. You guys have already seen that it does work on both ends. All right, but I have now joined, and as you can see, I'm gonna go ahead and mute the phone here. As you can see, I am currently talking to myself as I usually do around here. I've got a working Jitsi server, so I'm gonna set this phone down, and you can see my display there. And I'm going to start recording So I'm gonna click start recording here. Now, if this doesn't work, a couple things you wanna take a look at are going to be a loop running free -H to see how much free RAM you have, and top to see what's using CPU on your system. But we're gonna start recording, and with any luck,
recording is on.
Recording is on. We've heard that message, and now if I refresh over here in our recordings directory, we do have a recording that's being written. And if I come in here and oh, we don't have file sizes displayed here. Here we go. So if I keep refreshing, we can see the file size is going up since we are actively recording. So now I can pick my phone up and I can talk and I can say, hey, this is Jacob, and this should be being recorded. If you want to actually control who is showing up in your recording, by default, the Jibri server is going to act just like any other participant, and whoever's talking the loudest at any given point, they're going to be the one who you're watching. But as a moderator, I can come in here and under settings, I can say more, everyone follows me, and I can click OK. So now whoever I'm clicked onto is going to be who the recording should be recording. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'll hang up my phone and I'll set that down, and we'll come down here and we will stop recording. And are you sure you would like to stop the recording? We will confirm.
Recording has stopped.
Recording has stopped. And if we refresh here, looks like our total recording ended up at 20.3 megabytes. And we do have a metadata.json file now as well, now that the recording has finished. And there's not a whole lot of metadata in there, just basically the meeting URL that it was taken from, a list of the participants, which none of us had set our names in here. But if we come over here and we copy our recording, I'm going to copy that to a local file. And I'm going to go ahead and minimize the actual Jitsi here so that's not distracting. Now we can open up this video, and as you can see, interesting, and this was not here in my tests, there's a message at the top of the Chrome window that's warning the user that Chrome is being controlled by automated test software, which we already know, so that's quite useless. Recording is on. We've heard that message, and now if I refresh, but as you can see, we do have our recording. It does have audio in it, and if I come in here, I can skip around here. And interestingly enough, looks like the recording was set to my webcam the entire time, and was not actually recording my phone at all. So I do want to just test real quick. If we go back and start recording again, I am going to join the room again. All right, and so now since everyone follows me, since I had that option turned on, I am just going to click on my phone, and we'll see if the Jitsi recording actually respects that. Oh, so then I just left, and does that mean the recording stops? What happened? I did not actually mean to hit the hang up button there. Looks like the recording is still running. And if we take a look at the video file here, I had that option turned on. I am just gonna as you can see, since I had the everyone follows me option turned on, the recording did follow me when I clicked on another user. So if you're going to want to record, you'll probably want to know what the recording is going to look like, at least in some semblance. So you'll probably want to turn on that everyone follows me option so that you can control who's actually showing up in the recording. Now I do want to see if we can get this Chrome is controlled by automated test software message to go away, since that's burned into the video right now. Okay, I found one thing that I missed. I warned you guys this video was going to be a doozy, so we are going to go ahead and make a directory at etc opt Chrome, and we will need the -p flag because some of these directories don't exist yet. So etc opt Chrome, policies, managed, and inside of there, we're going to echo in command line flag, security warnings enabled, false. Okay, so then we'll do a systemctl restart Jibri, which is going to restart the X server and Chrome as well. So after doing that, then we can come in here. I'll X out of that other recording. I'm going to start recording one more time, preparing to record the meeting. All right, we're recording. While we're recording, I'll take the opportunity to show you what happens if two different rooms try to record at once. So if somebody else went to jitsi.nerdonthestreet.com/test456 right now and they tried to start recording that room while this one's also being recorded, it's going to do the same thing as it would do right now if I tried to start a live stream. As you can see, if I try to start a live stream, it's asking me for an RTMP URL. I won't bother showing you that. I did test it out and it works. There's nothing extra you need to do to get RTMP to YouTube working that isn't already done if you're trying to get recording working. So you can just paste your RTMP URL for YouTube in there, and then we'll click start live stream, and this is what we'll see is all streamers are currently busy if you're trying to start streaming and there are no Jibri instances in that brewery. Or in this case, if we tried to start a recording in a separate room, it would say all recorders are currently busy because I've got one recorder and I'm currently using it. So there are no available recorders to join this room right now. So I'll go ahead and stop recording now and I'll confirm.
Recording has stopped.
And so we'll collapse this directory. We'll refresh. We've got a new directory and I'm going to copy this, paste it in here. I was so close to a flawless execution, guys. So close. But after running that flag, you can see, I'll mute this video so it's not playing the audio, but I'll go ahead and exit out of Jitsi Meet. You can see our recording playing here. It does not have the error message at the top, so I'll make sure to add that to my page on the Nerd on the Street Wiki as well. But that is it. We have Jitsi set up to stream and record. Now, was that worth it? Like I said, if you've got a local computer that's semi-powerful, you can just join the room in a web browser and use something like OBS to stream or record, or stream and record at the same time, which Jibri can't even do. So personally, I'm not sure if this would be a priority for me to get set up. However, there were a number of people who asked about getting it set up, and when I went to actually try and do it, I can see why people were having trouble, because a lot of the documentation is incomplete, and there were a lot of little gotchas that I went through to end up at this working setup. Guys, to that end, I did just want to mention as well, if you go to managedby.knots.co, if you want a Jitsi server or any other type of server really, and you just want someone else to figure all this stuff out for you so you don't have to, you can go to managedby.knots.co and I offer services where I will set up and maintain a server for you. You don't have to worry about keeping it up to date. Is an update going to break something, that kind of thing, because I will handle it all. And I can even implement cost-saving solutions so that you don't have to pay the full $40 a month to DigitalOcean or Linode if you're not actually using the server 24/7. So that's available if you want it, but for right now, hopefully if you were trying to set your own Jitsi server up and your own Jibri server up, hopefully this video is helpful to you. If you have any questions, ask on the forums at nerdonthestreet.com. And for now, I'm Jacob Kaufman. I'm the Nerd on the Street, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.